They didn't understand what they had found. When the first Terran distress signal was intercepted near the edge of the Orion Drift, the Galactic Council dispatched a Class II retrieval team. Routine, really. Species get lost. Ships go dark. It wasn't unusual to find fragments of a civilization collapsed under its own weight. What was unusual, though, was the silence that came with the signal. No pattern, no data burst, just an endless, repeating pulse. It wasn't calling for help. It was marking territory. The retrieval team landed on the abandoned human scout ship, expecting corpses. Instead, they found a single survivor. Designation: male. Unidentified Earthborn, unknown genetic alterations. His body was burned, muscles torn, no armor, no translator. He stood over the remains of what used to be a Zarin dissection crew, a mess of twisted bone and slashed organ sacs. They had tried to examine him. They had tried to dissect him while he was still breathing. He woke up in the middle of the operation. That was the last thing they ever did. The footage was scrambled. Security systems melted. A few shaky frames showed the human breaking a surgical drone in half with his bare hands. His face was expressionless, but his eyes, those eyes, looked like something that had already died and refused to stay that way. The retrieval team didn't make it back either. The Council recovered only one transmission before the signal went dark again. Category Red. Containment failed. Humanity is a threat. After that, the file was sealed. All personnel associated with the incident were reassigned, silenced, or disappeared. Rumors spread like fungus in the dark. Some said the human turned the crew on each other with nothing but words. Some said he never spoke at all. Only one thing was consistent in every whisper. He walked off the ship alone. And nothing followed him out. The Council issued a quiet decree. Earth species are not to be engaged. No communication, no interference. Above all, no capture. The penalty for disobedience, termination. But it was too late. The signal had reached other ears. Black market collectors, geneticists with no allegiance, war-fueled civilizations hungry for something new, something deadly, something human. They started hunting them, survivors, descendants, anyone tied to Earth's bloodline. What they didn't realize was that some of the humans weren't hiding. Some were waiting. They didn't find him again until the fall of Arkan 9, a fortified world once considered impenetrable, a colony of over 3 million civilians, guarded by elite Varkon commandos. The planet went completely dark in under an hour. Satellites caught fragments before the blackout, a figure walking through fire, dragging a blood-slicked blade made from the bones of something not found in the databases. Only one message came through, encoded in ancient Terran dialect. "You called us a threat. You were right." That's when the classification was made official. Species 626A, Homo sapiens, Category Red, Galactic Threat Level, Terminal. It wasn't the strength that scared them. It wasn't the violence, or even the rage. It was the fact that humans fought like they had already lost everything, and didn't care if they lived through the next minute. The kind of threat that doesn't negotiate. The kind of threat that remembers. The first time he killed, it wasn't out of anger. It was survival. Back then, he was just a boy. 17, maybe 18. Born on a shattered Earth that didn't exist on any galactic map. The skies above were always red from the carbon clouds. Oceans had receded into poisoned basins. Cities, once alive with electricity and noise, now lay like broken bones in dust and ruin. The last governments had fallen decades before. No leaders, no laws, just factions, clans, scavengers, and predators. He never had a name, not one he remembered. Names didn't mean much in the Ashlands. People came and went too fast for attachments. What mattered was whether you could keep moving, keep breathing, and more importantly, whether you could fight back. He was raised by an old mechanic, a man who barely spoke. He taught the boy how to patch wounds with melted plastic, how to rig explosives from power cells, how to take apart a rifle blindfolded. But more than that, he taught the one rule that mattered. If someone takes from you, take more from them. It wasn't a philosophy. It was math, balance, survival. You don't win wars with mercy. You win by making the price of touching you too goddamn high. When the Arcturian raiders landed, sleek in their chrome armor, convinced that Earth was nothing more than a dying farm planet, they expected no resistance. Their scout ships hit down near the southern outposts first. They took women. They took children. They experimented, harvested, logged, filed, and laughed. He was captured during one of their sweeps, tagged, chained, thrown into a cage not even tall enough to sit in. They studied him like a lab rat, recorded his pulse under pain, burned him to see tissue regeneration, broke bones to test resilience. He stopped screaming after the third day, not because it didn't hurt, but because he knew it excited them. By day 10, they moved to organ extraction. They wanted to test the cardiac endurance of a live Terran specimen. They sliced into his chest, but didn't get far. That was the moment something inside him changed. No one knew if it was evolution. Mutation. Some dormant reflex buried in the DNA of a species that had clawed its way up from extinction more than once. All they knew was that he stood up, ribs shattered, eyes sunken, and tore through 6 guards with the surgical saw still stuck in his chest. They tried to contain him. They failed. He didn't just kill them, he learned them, how they moved, how their armor worked, how their eyes shifted before they fired. He figured it out faster than their AI could analyze him. When he escaped, he left nothing behind but corpses and a burning lab. The universe didn't take notice right away. After all, one escaped human wasn't a threat. But then it happened again, on Delta Verge, then on the moon of Kol Surak, then again on a station after station. No network could track him, no signature, no traceable DNA markers. He didn't exist, but he left marks, always the same. Dozens dead. Footage erased. Warning scrawled in Terran dialect. You started this. Back at Galactic Command, high-ranking officials met in hidden chambers. Holoscreens buzzed with intercepted data and forensic files, each more disturbing than the last. One report described how a group of Varnori elite, considered the best in biochemical warfare, were found skinned, their remains folded into a circle. No human weaponry, no gunfire, just hands. He can't be alone, said one of the counselors. He wasn't, because Earth had been quiet for too long. It didn't mean Earth was dead. It meant Earth was waiting. Underground cities still existed, powered by geothermal cores. Geneticists continued their work in secrecy, using stolen alien data. Children were raised in virtual war zones. Entire generations were bred for adaptability, rage retention, and multi-species combat reflexes. They didn't want peace. They didn't even want revenge. They wanted dominance. Because if you're always the prey, sooner or later, the only option left is to become the apex. His name, eventually, became a myth. Some whispered it in fear, others in hope. Red Ghost, they called him, because he didn't leave behind anything solid, just the echo of what he'd done. But to him, it wasn't about fear or fame. He didn't care about making a point. He didn't even believe in justice anymore. He was hunting something specific. The original Arcturian surgeon who dissected his friends alive. The one who grinned when he cut into their lungs. The one who filed it under medical curiosity. The Arcturians were a powerful species, diplomatic, refined, seen as a shining example of galactic civility. What no one saw was their hidden labs, their trade in biological weapons, their addiction to dominance. He would burn their civilization to the ground to find one man, and they were giving him every excuse to do it. One night, on a drifting mercenary ship in the edge sectors, a captured Tarkin engineer was interrogated about Earth. His captors laughed, mocking his belief that humans were still alive somewhere out there. He didn't speak a word, until the ship's lights flickered, until the air turned cold, as if the very oxygen had decided to flee. Until the guards' heads exploded from within their helmets. Then, the Tarkin engineer looked at the last man still breathing, and whispered, "They're not coming. They're already here." A few parsecs away, in the command deck of a derelict station, the man known as Red Ghost watched the footage play back. He wasn't alone. Others were with him now, men like him, survivors, soldiers, ghosts, each one marked by the galaxy's cruelty, each one ready to return it tenfold. He looked into the dark screen, saw his reflection, the scar running down from his jaw to his collarbone, the cybernetic implant on his temple humming softly. And he thought of Earth, of the fires, of the screams, of the mechanic who gave him that first piece of knowledge. If someone takes from you, take more from them. Now, he was about to take everything. The target was called Cylon 3. To the Galactic Council, it was a peaceful research colony focused on biological sciences and genetic advancement, a jewel of interspecies cooperation, they said. But behind the polished domes and propaganda broadcasts, Cylon 3 was a slaughterhouse in disguise, a place where non-compliant life forms were dissected, rewired, and repurposed. Earthborns, Terrans, humans. The galaxy labeled them unstable. The Arcturians labeled them property. Red Ghost had a different word for them: brothers. He stood aboard the Feral Light, a Terran stealth cruiser designed from a hybrid of scavenged alien tech and human brutality. The hull was coated in stolen Varnori cloaking material, thermally invisible, sensor-deaf, and silent as death. The crew? No names. Just ghosts. Men broken by war and held together by vengeance. He stared at the projected map, a 3D layout of Cylon 3's underground lab network. The upper level was a facade, medical centers, research towers, botanical gardens. Below that was where the rot began. Sublevel Gamma housed live genetic testing chambers, cryodissection labs, and execution pits. That's where the Arcturian surgeon was stationed. That's where it would end. He turned to the men around him. No speeches, no ceremony, just one simple nod. And hell followed. They dropped at night. 3 pods, atmospheric breach under full stealth. No alarms triggered. The outer security dome, a lattice of smart glass and radiation shielding, was hacked mid-descent. The moment they hit the ground, they were already inside. Ghost moved first, silenced rifle tight to his shoulder. The shadows swallowed him whole as he slipped through the corridor. The team fanned out. Each had a sector. Each had a name burned into their memory. A torturer, a geneticist, a guard who enjoyed it too much. This wasn't war. This was a reckoning. Ghost bypassed the outer scans and slid down the vertical maintenance shaft that led to sub-level Gamma. The air grew colder. The lights flickered like they knew what was coming. He remembered this smell. Sterilized metal, recycled blood, ammonia masking rot. He remembered screaming. A scientist walked past him. Arcturian, thin, pale blue skin, 4 arms, high-rank ID. Ghost didn't hesitate. Arm around the throat, drag into the shadows, blade through the trachea. Quick, quiet, 1 level deeper. Gunfire echoed in the distance. Sharp bursts, controlled. His crew was doing the work. Silent, surgical chaos. They weren't here to conquer. They weren't here to plant flags. They were here to erase. He found holding cell 17 and froze. The glass was smeared with blood. Inside was a boy, no older than 10, trembling on a metal slab, his spine connected to live wires, not sedated, still breathing. Monitored. Red Ghost smashed the lock and pulled the kid free. The boy whimpered, his body twitching as the neural interface sparked. Ghost ripped it out anyway. The boy screamed and then stopped. Eyes wide with shock, staring into Ghost's face. He whispered one word. Human. Ghost gave him a slow nod. The boy started crying, not out of pain, but relief. Ghost lifted him in one arm and scanned the nearby console. 17 other children, all Terran-blooded. He sent a priority ping to the others. Mission parameters updated. No longer assassination. Now it was extraction. The base woke up. Sirens wailed. Walls turned red. The Arcturian surgeon must have seen the breach from his quarters. He locked down the exits, sealed the core, ordered the release of biological failsafes, hybrid beasts, brainwashed thralls, former human prisoners turned into monsters. Ghost didn't flinch. He'd fought worse. He tucked the boy behind a cargo crate and turned to face the incoming threat. A four-legged experiment burst through the corridor, glassy eyes, metal jaw, half human, half something else. It growled, sniffed him, recognized the scent, and charged. Ghost waited. 3 steps away, he sidestepped, drew a vibroblade from his waist, and sliced upward, through throat, through skull, through memory. The thing collapsed mid-lunge. Its last breath gurgled out like boiling air. He wiped the blade clean, grabbed the boy, kept moving. Further down. The others were making progress. One man, callsign Crater, broke through the lab storage using an alien flamethrower he'd modified into a fuel-pressurized cannon. He didn't speak much, but when the scream of burning Arcturians filled the comms, everyone knew he was smiling. Another, Wraith, hacked the security core, rerouted oxygen systems, and vented the upper-level guards into the void. Efficient. Cold. Just the way they trained. But Ghost was heading for only one place now. The surgeon's lab. And the surgeon knew it. The final door was titanium alloy, sealed with biosignature locks. He didn't bother slicing through. He detonated the wall beside it using a pulse charge made from stolen reactor cores. The explosion caved half the corridor and blew open the lab with a roar. Inside, everything was white, clean, clinical. Tables of tools, tanks of suspended test subjects, monitors showing live vitals of humans hooked up like lab rats. And in the middle, calmly sipping something from a polished cup, stood the surgeon. He was older now, Arcturian features more weathered, but those thin lips still curled into a smug grin. He set the cup down and raised both hands slowly. You survived. I was hoping you might. Ghost didn't answer. Do you even remember your designation? The surgeon said softly. You were Subject 12, the only one who fought the tranquilizer, the only one who... Ghost shot him. Twice. Not in the head. Not in the heart. In the legs. The surgeon screamed and dropped, blue blood spurting across the pristine floor. Ghost walked forward. Slowly. Deliberately. His boots left muddy prints of death. You don't get a monologue, he said. You get pain. He knelt beside the surgeon, knife in hand. You took everything, so now I take everything back. And then it began. Outside, the base was crumbling. Fire and blood choked the corridors. The Ghost crew had triggered the meltdown protocol. Civilians were evacuated. Some fought, some surrendered, some begged. They weren't here for civilians. But anyone in a lab coat? They didn't make it out. The boy from Cell 17 watched from the extraction shuttle. His hands were still shaking, but his eyes were different now. Like something inside had locked into place. like he'd seen what real power looked like. Red Ghost stepped into the shuttle last, covered in blood, the surgeon's ID chip in his hand, a token. No one said a word. They didn't need to. They had done what the galaxy told them was impossible. Terrans struck first and didn't stop. As the feral light ascended from the burning base, Ghost looked out the viewport. Flames engulfed the once pristine towers. Screams echoed in the transmission frequencies. The Galactic Council would be watching. They'd declare this a terrorist attack, a war crime, an act of madness. Let them. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Earth wasn't dead. Humanity wasn't lost. They had just evolved. And now? Now the galaxy would learn why Category Red didn't mean danger. It meant extinction. Cylon 3 burned for 6 standard hours before the flames touched the stars. The fire wasn't literal, not anymore. It was the fire of headlines, encrypted messages, intercepted distress calls, and broken black box transmissions flooding the Council's upper networks. Every race with a seat at the galactic table watched in stunned silence as footage leaked. It wasn't supposed to exist. The stealth raid was clean, their systems wiped. But something always slips through. A shaky surveillance feed, audio distortion, and a voice. "You took everything, so now I take everything back." Those words echoed in 12,000 languages. Across border worlds, corporate colonies, pirate stations, even in the deepest corners of neutral space. No one had ever struck a galactic research world with that level of brutality and precision. No one dared. Until now. The Council convened behind locked war walls, translucent plates glowing with live data. Senators, strategists, spy masters. The room buzzed with panic and posturing. 300 dead, barked a Zenorian noble, her tentacles flaring with anger. And 27 subjects freed, all human bloodlines. "This wasn't an attack," growled a Varnori general, armored like a mobile tank. It was a message. To who? Everyone. They pulled up the list of known human survivors. Every name tagged as extinct, missing, or unknown. Files previously sealed under diplomatic agreement now blinked red, unlocked under wartime emergency protocol. It was a massive intelligence failure. Someone had been funding these survivors. Someone had been training them. And worst of all, someone had helped them breach galactic firewalls. "They're organizing." "Impossible. We thought they were extinct, remember?" Silence followed. They all remembered Earth's fall. 50 years ago. Back when the Council still believed humanity could be absorbed into the universal system. Back when they thought kindness would tame them. When Earth refused to sign the Treaty of Submission, the Council decided it was time to apply pressure. Quietly, economically, then surgically, then with fire. It should have ended then. But it didn't. Back on the feral light, Red Ghost stood in front of the observation bay, staring into the void. The boy from Cell 17, now given the placeholder name Rook, stood beside him, arms wrapped in bandages. He hadn't spoken much since the rescue, but he followed Ghost everywhere now. Quiet, watchful. Ghost saw something in his eyes, that flicker he once had when he first stepped out of the fire, alone and angry. Rook was going to survive this world. But more than that. He was going to shape it. In the command room, Crater was already charting their next route. "We stirred the hive," he muttered. "No chance they'll let us disappear again." Ghost didn't look away from the stars. "They won't find us." Wraith leaned forward from the shadows. "But they'll hunt us. Harder. With more eyes." "Let them," Ghost replied. They weren't worried. These weren't normal men. Ghost didn't choose survivors because they could fight. He chose them because they didn't know how to quit, because every one of them had something burning inside. And now the fire was spreading. Across the galaxy, something strange began to happen. Unregistered freighters started vanishing, and later returned with their crews claiming they'd been saved by humans. On mining planets, corporate guards found recruitment posters carved into stone walls, old Terran war slogans reimagined for the stars: "Humanity forgives nothing." "We don't want peace, we want payback." "The Council burned Earth. Now we burn back." Entire generations born after Earth's fall were now questioning the official story. Schools had taught them that humanity was reckless, unstable, and violent, but now they were hearing tales of resistance, defiance, honor. In every tavern and deep space dock, someone whispered a different name: Red Ghost. Was he real? A symbol? A myth? Didn't matter. He was spreading. Meanwhile, in the dark heart of the Arcturian Empire, the surgeon's remains were recovered. His body had been torn apart. Face gone. ID chip removed. But his eyes were left intact, pinned to the wall above his medical table, still frozen in terror. The Empire didn't release a statement, but they doubled their fleet patrols, and they reclassified all Terran DNA carriers as Priority 1 exterminables. No arrests, no trials, just kill orders. The Council responded in kind. They activated a long, dormant division, the Severance Protocol. Officially, it didn't exist. It was designed for species-wide elimination campaigns, typically reserved for bioweapons and plague worlds. But now, they were using it on humans. A man named Commander Threx was put in charge. Varkon hybrid, former siege tactician, known for turning peace treaties into weapons. The kind of leader who didn't blink when a planet cried. His mission was simple: find the Red Ghost, erase his network, bury Earth forever. Ghost knew they'd come. That's why he went quiet. Not because he was hiding, but because he was preparing something bigger. The Feral Light docked at Station K92, a rogue platform orbiting a dead star, a place no official map recorded. Inside, dozens of humans trained under artificial gravity. Stolen weapons, scavenged armor, sweat, blood, rage. Ghost had set this up years ago. He called it Ash Spire, named after what Earth had become, but also what would rise from it. Ash Spire wasn't just a safe house, it was a forge. Rook stood beside the training platform, watching men twice his size punch through alloy targets. His body was still recovering, but his eyes weren't innocent anymore. They watched everything. Ghost approached him and crouched down. "You're scared?" Rook hesitated, nodded. "Good. That means you're not stupid." Rook looked up. "They're coming, aren't they?" "Yeah, they are." "Will we win?" Ghost paused, looked around at the broken men shaping themselves into weapons. At the maps, the stockpiles, the whispers across the galaxy. "We're not here to win," he said. "We're here to make them pay." A week later, word came through. A human outpost, Nova Drift, a smuggler's haven, was massacred. Hundreds dead, all with Terran ancestry. Threx had arrived. Ghost didn't mourn. He didn't break. He just picked a new target. Because this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about turning their own tactics against them. About making every strike hurt. About teaching them that humanity wasn't a species. It was a warning. And it had just been triggered. They called it Operation Clean Line. It was the first active strike of the Severance Protocol, and Commander Threx made sure the galaxy saw it. No stealth. No hesitation. Just brute force terror dressed in justification. The target? A repurposed mining colony named Cerro Vault. Situated on the edge of the Grath Expanse, it had once been a Terran labor outpost, forgotten after the fall of Earth. But over the last 2 years, Vault had quietly become a haven, run by humans, protected by old automated defense systems, and believed to be one of the Red Ghost's supply links. They were right. But it wasn't a military hub. Not really. Vault was home to families, scavengers, engineers, ex-soldiers who'd had enough of running. That didn't stop Threx. The orbital bombardment lasted 7 minutes. In those 7 minutes, 18,000 lives were erased. The planet didn't even have a functioning defense grid. The old Terran drones fired a few shots before being melted into slag. Communications were jammed. Escape ships were gunned down before leaving atmosphere. It wasn't a battle, it was a message. When it was over, Threx stood aboard his flagship, a Varkon dreadnought called the Authority, and broadcasted across all open galactic frequencies. His voice was calm, cold, calculated. Let this be understood clearly. The human species, classified as Category Red, is no longer under protection. Harboring them is treason. Showing mercy is weakness. There will be no second warnings. The Council didn't object. They didn't have to. Their silence was an endorsement. Word reached Feral Light 12 hours later. Wraith was the first to receive the transmission. He didn't say a word. Just walked into the common room, dropped the data chip on the table, and pressed play. The crew watched Vault die in silence. Pixelated flames, fractured screams, the last desperate transmission from a human child before the audio turned to static. Crater stared at the floor, knuckles white. One of his brothers had been stationed there with his wife. Ghost didn't speak. His face didn't change. He just stood there, arms folded, eyes fixed on the static. Rook sat in the corner, too stunned to move. When it ended, Wraith asked, "Orders?" Ghost finally looked up. His voice was gravel and steel. "We burn the Authority. You don't hit a dreadnought head on. Every species knew that. Dreadnoughts were floating fortresses, shielded, armed to the teeth, and surrounded by a cloud of escort ships. Getting close was suicide. Taking one down required a fleet. Ghost had neither, but he had hate, and he had a plan. Step 1. The lure. They hacked into a Council surveillance node and sent a false signal, a red ghost sighting near the debris belt of the Onira system. They knew Threx wouldn't ignore it. The man wanted a spectacle. He wanted to mount Ghost's skull on a pike and broadcast it from orbit. 2 days later, the Authority jumped into the system, surrounded by 6 war frigates and dozens of drones. They scanned, waited. Nothing. And that's when the Feral Light dropped in, not from a traditional jump, but from a blind slide maneuver, a suicide technique developed by desperate Terran pilots decades ago. You jumped without pre-mapping the trajectory. It was like diving headfirst through a minefield and hoping you came out breathing. They came out screaming. The Feral Light didn't aim for the dreadnought's guns. It went underneath, scraping its hull across the armored spine of the Authority until it latched onto one of the lower maintenance ports. The external breach was masked by an electromagnetic pulse, enough to black out every camera in a 500-meter radius. And then, they boarded. Ghost led the charge. It was not clean. It was not surgical. This was rage in motion. They came with modified Terran disruptors, illegal weapons that melted through armor and cooked organic flesh. Threx's men weren't ready. They expected a hit and run, not a full-scale boarding assault. Wraith set off chaos across the internal comms, replaying the cries of Vault's children over the dreadnought's speakers. "Is this your justice? Is this what makes you right?" Some of the crew cracked. Others went blind with fear, and Ghost kept moving forward. He knew where Threx would be. The bridge, shielded, locked, armed. He didn't care. Ghost fought through 3 waves of guards. One of them stabbed him through the shoulder with a heated pike. He didn't stop. Another tried to use a cryo grenade. Ghost tackled him into it and walked out of the blast frozen from the waist down, steam rising off his armor. He reached the bridge doors and planted a high-frequency disruptor against the lock. 10 seconds. 9. 8. His mind was back on Serovault, on the smoke, on the silence, on the way the child's voice cracked. 7. 6. 5. He saw Earth again, not what it was, but what was taken. 4. 3. He saw the old man who raised him, the mechanic who gave him his first knife. 2. 1. You wanted a monster, he whispered. Now you've got one. Boom. The door exploded inward, and Ghost walked through fire. Threx stood calmly behind a blast shield, already drawing his plasma pistol. He didn't get the chance to aim. Ghost tackled him across the console, slammed him into a panel hard enough to crack ribs. Threx was strong, enhanced, cybernetically reinforced. But Ghost wasn't just muscle. He was purpose. They fought like gods caged in metal. Fists collided. Blood sprayed. Sparks flew as armor cracked under bone and steel. Threx tried to choke him. Ghost bit through the man's hand. Threx headbutted him. Ghost drove a knife into his thigh. You killed children, Ghost growled. You call that war? Threx spat blood. I call it cleansing. That was the last thing he ever said. Ghost snapped his neck with both hands. No ceremony, no speech, just justice. The feral light evacuated 5 minutes before the Authority exploded. Wraith rigged the core. Crater handled the navigation. Rook, for the first time, stood at a gunner's seat, eyes focused, lips silent, and heart cold. They jumped out just as the dreadnought tore itself in half. One beacon survived, left behind by Ghost. It broadcasted a single message on all public channels. No mercy for murderers. Category Red will not go quietly. That night, across the galaxy, stars seemed to blink a little slower. The Red Ghost was no longer just a whisper. He had just killed a Severance commander, destroyed a dreadnought, and reminded the universe of something it tried to forget. You can only push humanity so far before it pushes back harder. The wreckage of the Authority still burned in orbit when the first uprisings began. Small ones at first. A weapons technician on Calthus 9 sabotaged his own Varnori commander's shuttle after finding out his ancestors were Terran. A transport crew on the Rim left their jobs mid-run and stole the ship, broadcasting old Earth war chants as they fled into the dark. Then it spread wider. Whole sectors blacked out. Communications went silent. Ships bearing no official markings slipped through Council patrol zones and disappeared into unregistered systems. When they reappeared, they had new weapons, new flags, a jagged red symbol that was starting to appear everywhere. An open hand, fingers cut, bleeding, a warning, a promise. Humanity had relearned how to fight, not as prey, not as rebels, but as something older, something primal. The Red Ghost had become more than a man. He was now an idea, and that was something the Council couldn't shoot. Back on Ashspire, the forge station hidden behind the collapsed star, Ghost stood alone in the drop chamber, stripped of armor, shirtless, chest heaving under the dim red lights. Scars covered his body, some old, from Earth, some fresh, from the Authority. He bled in silence. The medics had begged him to rest. Crater even tried to order it. But Ghost didn't sleep much these days. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the children of Serovault. He heard their screams, and worse, he heard nothing. Silence was the sound that haunted him now. Not war, not death. The silence that came after. Rook watched from a catwalk above. He was older now, not in years, but in posture. He walked like a soldier, sat like a predator waiting for its moment. The boy who once trembled in a cage was gone. Now, there was someone sharper in his place. Leaner, smarter, angrier. He came down to the chamber, holding Ghost's gauntlet. "It's ready." Ghost looked up, eyes sunken, face unreadable. He took the gauntlet, strapped it on, flexed the fingers. Rook didn't leave. "You're bleeding again." Ghost nodded. "Yeah. You should stop." He gave the boy a look, one that didn't need words. Rook said nothing more. Later, the commanders gathered in the war room, a narrow chamber filled with stolen maps, decrypted council files, intercepted transmissions, and holograms of moving fleets. Crater was fuming. "They've declared Sector 14 a no-entry zone. All known humans inside are being hunted like animals. No trial, no warning. Just execution orders." Wraith sat with arms crossed, face unreadable. "And the Council's pretending it's a containment operation." Ghost paced in silence. His jaw was locked tight. "They've got a new ship," Crater continued. "Experimental, cloaked, Council-funded. It's called the Sundiver. And it's not looking for survivors." Wraith added, "It's looking for you." Ghost didn't flinch. "I want the ship's specs, crew logs, navigation habits, everything." Crater leaned forward. "You can't just walk onto that thing. It's got an AI that predicts attack patterns, shields made from compressed gravity fields. It's a death trap." Ghost looked at him. "We've walked through worse." "You're bleeding internally." I said worse. Rook stood quietly near the door, listening. They didn't notice his expression. That night, Ghost sat in the observation chamber alone. No crew, no plans, just space outside, dark, silent, infinite. He thought about his old life, before the fire, before the Arcturians cut into his back and called it research. He didn't remember his mother's voice, or his father's name, just heat, and ash, and the way pain taught him to breathe again. The room's airlock hissed open. Rook stepped inside. "You don't talk to them anymore." Ghost didn't answer. Rook sat beside him. "They believe in you, all of them. But I think they're waiting for something else." Ghost turned. "Like what?" Rook hesitated. "Like your end. And what comes next?" Ghost looked back at the stars. "They'll have to wait." 3 days later, they intercepted a Sundiver recon drone near the edge of the fractured belt. Wraith hacked it. What he found inside nearly made him flinch, and Wraith never flinched. The drone had human combat behavior files, not just public data. These were internal recordings, from Ashspire, from them. Someone had betrayed them. Ghost stood in the middle of the debriefing chamber, staring at the drone core. Rook stood to the side. The room was dead quiet. Crater was pacing. "Only a handful of us have access to these logs. Someone sold us out." Ghost spoke finally. "We don't point fingers without proof." Crater snapped. "Proof? You think the Council pulled these out of thin air?" Ghost turned slowly. "You accusing someone?" Silence. Then, "Yeah. Him." Crater pointed at Rook. The room stiffened. Even Wraith blinked. Rook didn't move. Ghost stepped toward Crater, slow. "You're sure?" "He's not one of us. He's a kid, a rescued lab rat. He's probably still chipped." Ghost hit him. One punch. Crater flew backward, smashed into the wall, blood pouring from his nose. Ghost didn't raise his voice. "He's more of us than you'll ever be." Rook stood still, but his eyes were wide, shocked. Ghost turned. "Meeting's over." That night, Ghost found Rook sitting in the weapon chamber checking his rifle. The boy looked broken, like something inside him had cracked. Ghost sat beside him. "You okay?" Rook didn't look up. "I didn't do it." "I know. But they don't. They will." Rook finally looked at him. Why'd you defend me? Ghost stared forward. Because someone once did the same for me. Rook frowned. Who? Ghost was silent for a long time. Then, he died, saving someone he didn't know, just because he could. Rook's voice was low. That sounds stupid. Ghost smiled faintly. Yeah, it was. But it worked. The next morning, the Sundiver jumped into proximity of Ash Spire. Just like that, they'd found them. Council fleets flanked it. Frigates spread across the perimeter like wolves ready to lunge. Ash Spire's alarms screamed across every level. Evacuation orders went out. Ghost stood in the central platform, staring at the Sundiver's silhouette. Crater limped in, nose still bruised but armed. Wraith already had 2 rifles slung across his back. Rook had his helmet on, armor fitted. No tremble this time. Ghost turned to them, voice calm. We hold the forge. We hold until we can't. Then we burn it ourselves. They came like thunder. The Sundiver broke atmosphere in total silence, but its presence shook the station like a heartbeat skipping in the dark. It didn't lead the assault with guns or bombs. It led with fear. The kind that froze weaker men in place. The kind bred by reputation alone. Ash Spire wasn't just a base. It was home. It had taken Ghost years to build it, to stitch survivors into fighters, to turn broken scraps of men into blades honed by loss. Now the Council wanted to erase it, to wipe out the forge that had birthed the rebellion. The countdown to annihilation had begun. Ghost stood on the central platform, surrounded by the cold hum of alarms and flickering red lights. His armor was scorched from the last fight, a permanent smear of blood across the shoulder plate. He wore it like a badge now, a reminder. Crater joined him, cradling a pulse rifle, fingers already twitching. 10 war frigates, he said, breath tight. 3 cruisers, 1 Sundiver. That's more firepower than we've ever seen. Wraith appeared behind them. They're using EMP netting. We can't jump, and communications are jammed. Ghost didn't blink. Good. That means they want us alive. Crater barked a humorless laugh. I hope they're ready to be disappointed. Below deck. The survivors were mobilizing. Ex-slaves, genetic experiments, former soldiers, even children who'd been rescued from labs, now holding weapons almost as big as their arms. Some had never fired a shot in combat. Others had known nothing but war. It didn't matter. They all followed one man. When Ghost entered the staging bay, every conversation died. He didn't shout, didn't posture. He just walked down the aisle between them and said one thing. They think we're broken. Let's remind them we're dangerous. And then he left to prep the first line of defense. The Council's attack came in 3 waves. Wave 1, drones, thousands of them. Insect-like, crawling across Ash Spire's hull, they used microblades to cut through plating, burying into the vents and weak points, attempting to disable the oxygen systems and ignite reactor cores. Ghost's counter? Atmospheric venting. They opened the outer hull deliberately. Every Terran on the station was already in vacuum gear. The drones weren't prepared. Thousands of them were sucked into the void, spiraling and spinning, their tiny screams echoing in ultrasonic waves no one could hear. Ghost stood by the observation window and watched them die with zero emotion. Wave 2. Commandos. Biologically enhanced Council soldiers dropped from stealth pods directly onto the spine of the station. Fast, brutal, unrelenting. The Terrans met them in the bone tunnels, narrow access shafts meant for maintenance, now repurposed as kill zones. Crater led the front. He didn't use a gun. He used a hammer. Every swing shattered bones and sent commandos crashing into steel walls. His armor was painted with the blood of 20 species by the end of the second hour. Wraith handled the upper decks, using hacked security turrets to ambush squads from the shadows. He kept the lights flickering. The corridors shifting. The commandos never knew where the floor would drop out or where death would come from. Rook led the youngest squad, the Ashlings, barely old enough to shave, but trained by Ghost himself. They didn't hold the line, they pushed it. Every time the commandos gained ground, Rook's team took it back with explosives, fire, and rage too old for their faces. Wave 3. The Sun Diver itself. The ship moved into low orbit, cloaking active, its rail cannons charged. No more games. Its goal? Destroy Ash Spire's reactor core from orbit. Ghost knew it was coming, and he had prepared. The Sundiver fired its first rail round. Ghost intercepted it. Not personally, but through a refraction shield he had hidden beneath Ash Spire's exterior plates. A shield built from the leftover energy of collapsed star cores, designed to redirect kinetic impact. The Sundiver's cannon shot back at itself. The explosion didn't destroy the ship, but it cracked it, like a beast finally wounded. The galaxy's most powerful warship had just harmed itself trying to kill a Terran station. The message was clear. This wasn't a weak hold anymore. This was a fortress, and Ghost was its goddamn gatekeeper. But victory never came without cost. By the 6th hour of the siege, the bone tunnels were littered with Terran bodies. The Ashlings had lost 8 of their own. Crater was wounded, a spike through his left thigh. Wraith's right hand was shattered, and in the command center, blood dripped from Ghost's nose. He had taken a hit to the chest from a blast round earlier, hadn't told anyone. Internal bleeding was spreading. His breathing was slower now. Every movement brought pain. But he refused to stop. Ash Spire was still standing. That was all that mattered. Then came the final breach. The Sundiver launched a dropship directly into the command chamber, a spearhead team. Elite assassins trained specifically for Red Ghost termination. They entered in silence. Ghost was already waiting. The fight was savage, intimate, no guns, just fists, knives, and brutality. One of the assassins severed a tendon in Ghost's leg. Another crushed 2 ribs. A third almost blinded him with a neural disruptor. But Ghost didn't fall. He fought like Earth itself, stubborn, scorched, but unwilling to die. He broke the neck of the last assassin with a garrote made from their own tactical cord. When the smoke cleared, blood covered the floor. Most of it his. Rook found him slumped against the console, breathing shallow. "Ghost!" He knelt beside him, pulling off his helmet, panic in his voice. Ghost opened one eye. "You win?" Rook nodded, voice cracking. We held the forge." Ghost coughed, a deep, wet sound. Blood spilled from his lips. "I can't feel my arms." "You lost a lot of blood." "Feels like I lost the war." "No," Rook said. "You just taught the galaxy it can't kill us quietly anymore." The Sundiver retreated. Ash Spire was still standing. But Ghost? He didn't. He was placed in the medbay, hooked up to a recycled life support system that buzzed louder than it worked. Crater, Wraith, and Rook stood beside him. The man who had made them what they were was dying. The lights inside Ash Spire dimmed for the first time since its creation. Not because of damage, not because of power loss, but because the man who built it, the one they called Red Ghost, was slipping into silence. He lay in the medical bay, surrounded by cracked walls and flickering monitors, tubes stitched into his flesh, pumping synthetic oxygen into lungs that barely held. The medics had done all they could, stabilized him, patched what they could see. But the damage went deeper. His body was shutting down. Bit by bit. Outside the walls, the station still pulsed with life. Engineers rewired systems. Fighters dragged off corpses. Rookies sharpened blades next to blood-soaked veterans. Ash Spire had survived the Sundiver. But Ghost wouldn't survive the night. Crater stood beside his bed, arms crossed, fists trembling. Wraith stood near the door, silent, head lowered. Rook sat at his side, still in his armor, refusing to leave. The medics gave them the warning hours ago. It was time. But none of them knew how to let him go, because this wasn't just a man. This was the reason they were still breathing. Ghost opened his eyes just once. Not fully. Just enough to see Rook beside him. He tried to speak, but nothing came. His voice, once fire and thunder, was now just wind against stone. Rook leaned in. "I'm here." Ghost stared at him for a long time, and then, with blood-dried lips, he mouthed one word. "Win." And then he was gone. Just like that. No explosion, no music, no final scream, just silence. Crater turned and punched the wall. His fist broke before the steel did. Wraith left the room without saying a word. Rook stayed. He stayed long after the machines flatlined, long after the others left to prepare for what came next. Because something in him died that day, too. They didn't bury him. There was no Earth to return him to. So they gave him to the stars. The launch tube opened above Ash Spire. His body, wrapped in black alloy weave, was loaded into a memory pod. Engraved on the casing, Red Ghost. Species, human. Designation, vengeance. Then the engines fired, and the pod vanished into the void, a missile of memory aimed at no destination, meant to drift forever. And yet, he wasn't gone. Because before he died, Ghost had left something behind, a data package, encrypted under a triple-lock security seal, hidden in Ash Spire's backup drive. No one knew it existed, until Wraith found it. Inside was a message, not for them, for Rook. The boy-turned-soldier stood in the war chamber, alone, when Wraith slid the chip into the console. A projection flared. Ghost appeared, younger, upright, battle-scarred but unbroken, recorded after the Sundiver's first recon flight. He spoke like he knew the end was near. "If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it. Good. That means I finally did something useful. I didn't build this for me. I built it for what comes next." "And that's you!" Rook's hands curled into fists. "I didn't save you to turn you into me. I saved you because someone needs to carry this flame. And you, I saw it in your eyes the day we pulled you out of that cage. You weren't broken. You were waiting. So now it's your turn. They called us Category Red. Show them what that really means." The message ended. Rook didn't cry. He just stood there, jaw clenched, heart thundering, and then he turned, walked out. That same night he called a meeting in the Ash Spire war chamber. Everyone was there. Fighters, pilots, engineers, recruits. Crater stood with a brace on his leg, arms folded. Wraith leaned against the wall, expression flat. Rook stepped to the center. He didn't give a speech. He didn't yell. He just said 3 words. "We hit back." Silence. Then Crater nodded. Wraith gave the faintest smile. And just like that, a new war began. Phase 1. Retaliation. Every system complicit in Severance Protocol was mapped. Every name, every ship, every general. No more defense. No more running. They struck planet-side labs with orbital torpedoes. They hijacked Council data towers and broadcast the footage from Cerro Vault. The children's screams, the orbital fire. They leaked it everywhere. Even the Council's most loyal citizens started asking questions. Phase 2. Infiltration. Rook led a mission into the diplomatic core on Valexis Prime, a clean city world untouched by war. He didn't blow it up. He did worse. He walked into the High Council Hall, unarmed, and put the corpse of a Severance official on the main table, wrapped in the same body bag used on Terran prisoners. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He left a card behind, written in ancient Terran script. He was better than any of you. Phase 3. Symbolism. The Terran flag was reborn. Not the one from Earth's final days. Not the fractured, corporate-owned nonsense. This one was simple. A blood-red background. A black skull, not human, pierced by a spear, and beneath it, "Forgiveness is extinct." That flag appeared everywhere, painted on walls in abandoned stations, branded into the side of council convoys, burned into the shields of Terran warships that never officially existed. And behind it all stood Rook. He wasn't the loudest, he wasn't the strongest, but he was the most dangerous thing the galaxy had ever created, a human with nothing left to lose, trained by the man they failed to kill. The Council tried to spin the losses. They called Rook a terrorist, a rogue clone, a lie. But fear doesn't need facts. And by the time the Outer Rim Coalition started defecting, offering aid, safe zones, technology, it was already too late. Humanity was no longer a forgotten species. It was an infectious revolution. And the name Red Ghost? It became a curse. It became a prayer. It became the last thing many Council soldiers heard before the lights went out. Because Rook wasn't fighting alone. Now the galaxy was filled with broken men, and broken men don't stop. Epilogue. 3 years later. Ash Spire was bigger now. Rebuilt. Reinforced. Not a forge anymore. A command center. Rook stood at the helm, older now, harder in the face, sharper in the eyes. He stared at the map of enemy territories. Behind him stood the next generation, born in fire, raised in silence, ready for war. And on the wall, next to the flag, a steel plate, etched with one sentence, Ghost's final words: "Win."